good morning, everyone, and welcome to our online webinar, Emancipation from Within. My name is Sarah Haffenden, and I'm the Marketing Communications Manager at UKZN Extended Learning, also known as UEL. So in case you are unfamiliar with UEL, we are the continuing education unit of the University of KwaZulu-Natal, and we offer all the short courses on behalf of the university. So we are in full support and compliance with the directive of the national lockdown, which was issued to address the COVID-19 pandemic. So we have embraced the changes and have launched a number of projects aimed at providing free access to learning materials during the lockdown period. So one of these projects is our online learning webinars, and our webinars will continue throughout August and September and will be offered once a week on Tuesdays at 10 a.m. But please do take a look at our final slide at the end of this webinar for further details on upcoming webinars, or you can visit our website at www.ukznextendedlearning.com. So please note that due to the nature of this webinar, we will not be able to address raised hands and questions throughout the presentation. So please would you post all comments and questions in the Q&A box, and these will be addressed at the end of the webinar. So we'll also allow for live questions at the end. So if you'd like to ask a question live, you can just raise your hand and we will open up your mic and you can ask your question that way. So I'd now like to introduce you to our guest speaker for today, Zinhle Mpangosa. So Zinhle is a seasoned organizational development specialist, a digital transformation and cultural strategist. Zinhle has spent the past decade understanding organizational behavior and facilitating solutions that transform their way of being, policies and processes that, when implemented, profoundly improve operational effectiveness and competitive advantage. Her professional experience and exposure is a mix of digital change management, cultural and leadership development, and her expertise and experience emanate from working in major consulting firms and across industries such as the public sector, mining, retail, and financial services. So she's a doctoral candidate researching the future of work. She is deeply passionate about her role of supporting organizations design human-centric innovations by leveraging organizational culture, employee engagement, and effective change management. She specializes in the identification and transformation of belief systems that restrain business and personal progress, and is a recipient of the 2018 Inspiring 50 Award for Women in STEM. So Zinhle is currently the Transnet Executive Manager for Group Talent and Transformation. So welcome, Zinhle, and over to you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us this morning on an interesting topic about emancipation from within. I think it's quite straightforward what it's about in terms of emancipation and coming from within. And obviously, it's one of the topics that we are covering during the month of August, where we are celebrating women and women's liberation. And happy belated Women's Day or Happy Women's Month to all of the women who are in attendance. So because we are unable to see each other, so I'm not even sure whether we've got women or men attending, but welcome to everyone. And I hope we're going to enjoy the session together. All right, so normally when I start, I usually get these gremlins. Let's see. Sorry, I just want to move on to the next page. Okay, Sarah. There we go. Oh man. Okay, this is what happens when you work from home, thanks to COVID-19. We've had a new norm. Fantastic. All right, so just in looking at the word emancipate and considering and in line, and as to why I chose this topic, for me, I was writing a piece about recovering from a COVID-19. In fact, I've written about 3 pieces. One was one that looked at when the fear of staying at home supersedes the fear of contracting COVID-19. And what was that about? It was around building social awareness around domestic violence or gender-based violence, whereby women are even more afraid to be at home than of COVID-19. So where a person is meant to be isolated or be in isolation because they've been exposed to COVID-19, but they'd rather turn up at work, infect others, rather than stay at home, because the fear of being at home is worse than contracting the COVID-19. Or even at the beginning of the lockdown, where we experienced non-adherence to staying at home, and the dynamics in terms of the social injustices and what has been noticeable is that the increase in domestic violence because of people being stuck within the same walls and not having sufficient outlet. Not that I'm saying that women abuse or child abuse must be an outlet, but so my thinking around writing about women and women's liberation or their freedom, even to just be at home and enjoy the comfort of their homes, was that much more scary than contracting COVID-19. And as it would happen, being at work, because we are social service, not social service, the essential service, I also managed to contract the same. And in my reflection on writing about my journey, it was how I approached the dealing with the virus. Now, the word emancipation from within, and when I thought about that was, when we look at, so in terms of this, the meaning is it's about giving someone a political or legal right that they did not have before. And we know that with women, they did not have the same rights as men, hence the August 9 that we now celebrate. And we've known that also with minors or female minors, in terms of their limitations with freedom, that also was limited. So going back to the piece as to why I thought about it was, I want to just, before going on in terms about the thinking, the quote that I've got here from Bob Marley's song, which is "Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds." So it goes back, when you look at emancipation, it's talking about structural liberation. That yes, as women previously, we structurally or legally did not have rights. However, even with the emancipation, even with the liberation, there are still some form of chains that, not necessarily as the one is that the pirates in Bob Marley's song had, where they were physically chained. Our chaining has become more around our view and perceptions around life. And that's where then I go back to, in terms of how did I come about to think, to say, this is the subject I want to consider. So as I was recovering from COVID-19, I reflected on how we each approach various situations in life, and our approach to those things determine the outcome of that. So basically around our perceptions, and that our perceptions are our reality. So at times a perception or a view might not necessarily be the truth as such, but it is the reality that you have. And my thinking was around, okay, so according to work, I've come in contact with somebody who or become exposed, so therefore I need to be in isolation. And initially very angry, but then next thing I was like, okay, what's my view and thoughts around that besides anger? Because anger was the first state. I just made up my mind that, you know what, I'm in the situation, I'm going to approach it from a positive mind, that whatever outcome the test becomes, I'm going to choose to be well about it. And in my thinking about that was like, okay, now when we consider the various challenges or how we view life, we can find ourselves either bound by our thoughts. And that's basically that around this quote, is that some of us are not necessarily chained physically or chained by our society or even in our households as women, but our thinking has got us bound. Our feelings have got us bound about the various things. So as I'm getting into the webinar, I'd like for you to think, and I'm going to have 2 reflection points. So the first one being, what is your dream? And the reason I want to make a focal point on your dream and where you are going with your dream versus the mindset and the liberation or the emancipation that comes from within, you will see that it's a transformation process that I'd like to journey with you. And so in terms of what is your dream, what goals have you put in place thus far in relation to your dream, and what's holding you back? Because the holding you back could be exactly what we're going to be discussing right now in terms of your emancipation, that the liberation for you to live the life that you were created for, the life that you are worth living, is probably restricted by the mindsets that you hold about yourself, about your society, about your global view, basically. So In terms of some definitions, because there's words I'm going to be using so that we are all together in the same page. So in terms of context, your frame, what you give words, the things that you give meaning to, your consciousness, your state of being in terms of your awareness, and in terms of your responsiveness to your inner and outer worlds, and your way of being, how you are, how you show up. And then stories, the narrative in your head based on your interpretation from past experiences, beliefs, and an opinion that you consider to be facts or not true. So as a foundation of our discussion, it's around mindsets. Now, with emancipation and a mindset, I like to use the example of how an elephant is trained, and where you end up having an elephant mindset. So you find that an elephant to be trained to stay in, whether it's a circus or it's being trained to be in a zoo, but in a confined space where it is required, because obviously an elephant is a massive animal that can just about run over anything. So a training and grooming, and that's exactly what society does. It's a conditioning and grooming. So when you train an elephant to not escape its chains, is that from a young age, the elephant is taken, strapped onto a pole and with a chain. And as it tries to yank itself away over and over again, it discovers that it can't move away. And eventually it gives up and lets go and accepts that this is my condition, this is my situation, and I can't escape. And once it's conditioned, then that is let go. Then the chains are removed, the pole is removed, and the elephant is allowed to roam freely. The difference now is that this free elephant never tries to escape. It doesn't try to pull away, and it doesn't try to yank itself away, simply because in its mindset, it has that causal effect. So what I've said here is that most human dynamics of transformation, because part of what we're talking about, the emancipation, is transformative in nature. So it's a transformational process. It is a process even. But where we need to start is that the mindset is causative. What that means is that what you have in your view and in your mind, that is what becomes your reality. Now, with an elephant, it's stuck. And we go through a similar thing. The difference with human beings, though, is that we are able to become conscious and free ourselves and know that. So unlike elephants, where you are now stuck in that elephant syndrome, you can't be able to move away, but it takes a process and it's a change, and it follows certain universal laws. So that's basically the premise of what we are discussing. Now, when I talk about consciousness, with your consciousness, it's about how aware of your state of mind, how aware, how your inner being, so your norms, what you've accepted as a grooming and a conditioning, and that's why I use the elephant example, that it gets groomed and shaped. So in terms of how your ego is formed, it's molded in a particular way in a belief system. It's molded by the type of teaching and exposure, whether it's a culture of a religious belief system that makes women smaller or less, or even to be called the weaker sex. Honestly, who came up with those two words and put them together? Or they are called frail, or whatever the conditioning, because that's what it is, or you are groomed into believing something. So now sometimes victims of abuse, whether it's abuse of sexual nature, they are usually groomed into accepting and normalizing their life, such a point that they voluntarily almost participate in an act that they would ordinarily not have because of the grooming and the conditioning. So the consciousness I'm talking about here is whereby you become aware of your inner state. You become aware of beliefs, because we all have belief systems. All right. And it just, the difference is that between the elephant and yourself, or myself, is how enabling is the belief system that you are holding on to? Are you even aware of the belief system? All right. Because at times you can have a belief system, and that is why I've used the iceberg effect, where the belief system is underneath. You can't see it. All right. The norms, the values, the assumptions being how you make interpretation of information, how you look at the world, interpret it, and give meaning to it. All right. These are all invisible and they are not in our state of consciousness. And yet, it's what informs how we behave, how we then tolerate certain behaviors, how we tolerate people treating us in a particular way, and whether we end up with what is called the Stockholm effect, where you start to associate and be understanding to your oppressor or the environment that you are in. So consciousness then becomes you being how aware you are of what are the kind of thoughts, what beliefs do you have in mind that have got you locked in, all right? And as you see with this quote from Les Brown, is that the biggest enemy that we have is to deal with is yourself. Because if there is no enemy within, then the enemy outside can do us no harm. So the first thing as women is understanding within me, within the grooming that I've had, within the words that have been spoken to me from my young age up to growing up, how have these words conditioned how I see myself? How have I devalued myself because I've entertained others' thoughts, views, and feelings about me, and then I've adopted and accepted those as mine? Because now when you have to engage with whatever is oppressive that is external, it becomes that much harder, because inwardly you already are wearing that frame of somebody else's view about you. You are already the elephant stuck on a pole where there is no pole anymore. So that is why then the journey becomes that in terms of the liberation, it comes from within. That you can't even be in a constrained environment, but when the choice from inside is such that I have dealt with my states, and then this is a process that we're going to go about in terms of dealing with that. And how do you then transition from being in an elephant syndrome towards a liberated and emancipated and free person? And this is where I come into in terms of your thoughts, the consciousness. How aware of your thoughts and what words are you speaking to yourself? So as I'm thinking the lie, and your consciousness needs to be aware of what is truth and what is a lie. And the thing I spoke about earlier on, said about perceptions, that some of the chains we have are not the physical chains, but the chains are the perceptions that we have about ourselves, about our environment, about society. And being able to identify what is truth and what is a lie. And the lie that you start telling yourself that you have heard someone say or that you have been conditioned to believe then starts becoming a reality. Then your mind believes in that and starts acting it out. And so the first part of consciousness is, what thoughts do I have about me? Are these thoughts enabling or are they devaluing? How does it serve me to hold on to these thoughts in relation to my dream? And that is why I spoke about the dream. What is your dream? And how close are you to achieving that dream? Now, in terms of the thoughts that you have and the reality that you are experiencing, the first step of consciousness then becomes around what thoughts you are having, what limiting beliefs do you have? So, for example, some of the drama that goes on in our head, and when I use drama, I mean the stories. So the story could be, oh, whoa, this and that happened to me. So in terms of possibilities, so what are your limiting unconscious stories? I'm not good enough because my background was this, or because somebody I was once married to who probably has their own psychological dramas and stories decided to rub off their drama on me. And as a bucket, I carried the vomit and made the vomit mine, all right? Or it's impossible for me to do A, B, C, D, E because then story. So when I talk about story, is the justification you give to yourself for not living up to your purpose, or not living up to your dreams, or not living up to what you know that this is what I aspire to be. So you generate a story. And the thing is with the story, it sounds nice. It puts you in a comfort zone. Not that the comfort zone is comfortable. It's a comfort zone because it doesn't disturb ego. Ego likes to maintain status quo. It doesn't like things that are going to be disruptive, doesn't like things that are going to make it fearful, doesn't like to change anything about the status quo. So you get set in a comfort zone, and that's why it's a mindset. So in the mindset, it is impossible for me to do A, B, C, D, E. It is impossible for me to walk a journey of 1,000 miles because I have started to believing that. Or for me to live my dream, for me to acquire my dream, for me to do A, B, C, I need him. But I was born by myself. I came to the universe by myself. Even though I'm a twin, I entered the universe by myself. But I need him or I need her in order for me to do. And these are some of the thinking that I'd like you to start processing in line with the dream that I asked you about. What is your dream? What is the limiting unconscious story? And the story being the justification why you're holding on to the belief. Because you have to have the belief or the thought, and then the story is what justifies keeping you bound in that space, which becomes a comfort zone. As I've mentioned, it's not a comfort zone. Life begins at the end of a comfort zone. Or I can't cope. Now, I'm not saying that you can't say you can't cope, but in terms of your reality, at times this becomes a story where you're planning, your scheduling of things around you, or overcommitment, where you, as actually the limiting unconscious belief is that you need to say yes to everyone. And you need to explain to them why you must say yes. You must watch men. They can say no without even flinching. You ask for something, you want to change the remote, no, or whatever. And a person continues with life. But with us, oh no, I need to do this and whatever. So you find yourself, you've overcommitted. You've overcommitted financially, you've overcommitted emotionally, you've overcommitted with your time, you've overcommitted to everything. Why? Because I want to be accepted. Why? Because I believe I'm not good enough, or because of the other one. I'm seeing a lot of flashes in terms, I don't know if it's notes or hands, and I know Sarah had mentioned that we aren't able to do comments or ask questions, so you'll guide me, all right? So you get to a stage where you can't cope because you wanted to be liked, you wanted to be accepted, you wanted to be included, you wanted to be a part of. Now, these are all ego related aspects of our thinking. I will unpack just now in terms of ego and our way of being, all right? Or I'm ashamed of, then it's the story. So these are some of the things that I want you to process in line with your dream and what's stopping you. And now the liberation from this can only come from within, because it is I who is saying I am not good enough. It's not somebody else. It starts with I. And the thing is with I, it's identity, just as I starts with identity. So I've identified myself with a negative story. And that story becomes my reality, and then it just creates drama. And all I'm doing now, I'm a participant in a drama that I unconsciously scripted because I adopted other people's beliefs or thinking or the grooming, or I'm on autopilot. That's another thing. When we aren't even aware of what kind of thinking was I at that landed me in the situation that I'm in, or because I want to divorce ownership. Because the other difficult part about being conscious is that you need to take ownership. Now, ownership is difficult if it means I need to account to myself that actually the reason that I have ended up in a dwang is because I did this, I thought that I was feeling this way, and therefore I committed to this because I thought it would change that. Now, the I story is your identity. It becomes your chain to the pole as an elephant. But this is when the opportunity comes in terms of now becoming conscious. So that unlike the elephant that's permanently groomed into that state, human beings can be able to open their eyes and lift the veil of this unconscious drama, unconscious belief system, the lies that the world has told you, or the various shameful experiences that you have gone through. And then this is what I want to explain when I speak about ego. So not the ego that she thinks she's all this and more. The ego is our conditioning. How, as and it's a smaller part of you. So I mentioned at the beginning is your way of being and your ego. Now, in terms of ego, it's your programming. You're a fairer sex or you're a weaker sex. Okay, programming number one. You are Black, you are white, you are Indian, you are colored, and it comes with the story, right? I'm Catholic, I'm Muslim, I'm Jew, or I am whatever else. It's a program. It comes with a belief system that I get programmed into. So that's what the ego part is. It's an unconscious state of your lower self. It's automatic. You don't even think about a response when you're in ego state. Because, and as I mentioned with ego, at best, it's about protecting the status quo. Do not shake anything. Don't change things that don't need to be shaken. Don't go into drama. I'm here to keep you safe. Remember, the reason you were conditioned this way was for your own good. Therefore, my job as your ego is to maintain that status quo. And it reacts to stuff rather than considers and actively, so I'm trying to remember the word, between responding. Yes. So you generally find that when things happen, when you respond from an ego perspective, it's a knee-jerk reaction. Something happens to you, you react. And it's about safety. How I look to preserve my status. It's about my fears that I don't want the world to see. It's about naming and shaming things in my head that I do not want to be a part of. So really, ego keeps you in a very small state of who you were designed and created to be. And at most, if you rock the boat, it turns away. It's a fight, flight, or freeze type of state. But your being, and that is why even with the two pictures, so the one is a very boxed in way of viewing the world, almost even like an ostrich when it hides its head in the sand. So the box becomes the context within which you were programmed. And the ego wants to maintain the safety of the box. We will not get out of, and that is why then you find the saying, think out of the box. No, not really. You don't want to think out of the box. You just want to be. Because thinking out of the box is telling the ego, no, keep me inside the box. It's threatening. It's unknown, it's unsafe. Whereas being, it's when you freely flow and it's your higher self, it's your higher being. It's basically almost how you were as a kid, whether 3 or 4. Your mom says jump, I'll catch you, you jump. You don't ask how many times, no, are you sure? Is there a safety net? Is jumping gonna be safe? No. 3-year-old, jump, yes, mommy, I'll catch you, right? It's an unconditional presence where you are just freely being. You're awake to your thoughts. You are conscious of what is causing you to be, and you see the bigger picture. You are not limited by being excluded. You are not limited by being part of, and I mentioned in the previous slide around how you get to a point of not being able to cope because you were thought, your ego said you're not good enough, you want to fit in, you want to be a part of, you want to blend in with society because society said you must be married and have 3-5 children, you must have a degree, you must have a car, you must have this, you must have that. And ego puts you in that terrible uncoping condition. Whereas being is like, no, I want to swim upstream because that's how I'm designed. And in the choices I'm making, I'm deliberate because I'm responding to the world as I clearly see it and where I want to be and how I choose, and it's a choice, how I choose to show up. And that's basically the emancipation where it comes in. That's where the breakthrough comes in. When you start seeing the world through the eyes of possibility, the eyes of an eagle, because you notice an eagle hardly ever flaps its wing and panics when it's up in this. It glides and soars, and it's free. It's being. It's not in a box. It's not constrained. It's not constrained about its environment. It doesn't get scared that it's going to fall off the sky, and it turns towards the wind. In fact, when it rains or it's pouring, the eagle just rises even up higher than the clouds. So even in a storm, because in life you will have storms, you'll have situations, you'll have challenges, but with ego, freeze, sprint for the door, run for the hills. Pretend you don't know that you have a problem. Pretend it doesn't exist. It's not even there. Whereas with being, you can look at the challenges you have and confront them for what they are. It is part of being included from within yourself. You know, all goes, you flow, you are in your natural state. So that's a difference. And the part of getting to freedom, it comes from within. Being free from ego state of being. And being as a human being that you were created in your lovely image that you're in. So in terms of how do you know when you're in an ego state or you are responding from an ego state? These basically are the reactions that I know. It contracts when it's in fear. So, and in contraction, you'll see that the behaviors are different. So mentally, you start thinking, I cannot, I'm unable to, it won't work. Every negative word that you can think of. In fact, sometimes when I do change management training, I usually go into when you think of change, and that's why, especially with transformational change, transformational is psychological. So it's a process that you go through in the mind. I'll take getting married as an example. You choose you want to get married. The first person who opposes that view is yourself. Ego. Why? Now there's going to be two of us in this space. So ego will start giving you all the reasons why not. Bad idea. No, he's a jerk. No, he's going to do this. No. So by the time the other three people come and convince you otherwise, you're already good to say, no, I'm not going to try it, because the enemy within has already won and told you that, you want to change the status quo? No. We like it in single word. No, we don't like it there. It's a comfort zone. In a comfort zone, there's nothing comfortable about it. It's just being in bondage of your ego. Then physically, the tension, the knotting in the tummy, the heart rate, almost like you feel like you're going to have a heart attack just thinking about pursuing your dream. Well, that's me as well. Every time I have to open my mouth and talk to people and have to either give a training or a session, ego goes into play. I get tummy bugs. I can't think. I can't put my thoughts together. And it feels like, oh my word, I'm going to die. But it's a lie. I'm not going to do it. So I've had to learn with this one, feel the fear and do it anyway. Because you can't be an ostrich and pretend the fear is not there. And that's the difference between ego and being, if you noticed. So I'm aware that I have fear. I'm not going to run away from what I intended to do. I will feel the fear and do it anyway. And then I'll get over it. Emotionally, you feel small or artificially large. So you find some people are just prancing about, chest out. Nah, not because that's how they're feeling. Ego is at play. And for me to feel better, let me make you feel smaller so that I can be even bigger, and my ego and I can feel like we are all in good. And then obviously behaviorally, it all goes there, you know, whether it's fight, flight, or freeze. Actions stands for self-interest, me, myself, and I, the whole trinity. All right, there's no room for other people. It's about self-preservation. It's about that status of keeping me small, imprisoned in my head. And ego turns away from what it fears and pursues what is right, not what is right. So what that means, what is right in the view of maintaining the status quo, but not what is right for you. So let's say, like, I have butterflies every time I have to present. What is right for ego would be for me to opt out. Then I don't have to feel ashamed. Remember, part of the words that we used earlier on, I won't have to feel like I'm not good enough. I won't have to feel that I'm not going to cope, that I don't have to feel all sorts of negative words. But when you are in a state of being, you do the right thing in spite of what the ego says is the right thing, which is to flee. Great. Can I have a sip of water? Now, Henry Ford once said these words, that it doesn't matter what you're thinking. If you think you can do it or think you can't, in both cases, you are right. Because one, if you're entertaining ego, hey, thumbs up, you are still right. if you are thinking from a state of being, then you are right. But both states take you into different spaces. So it's then becoming mindful of your thoughts. Mahatma Gandhi said that mind your thoughts because they become your actions, which become your habits, which become your habits, then they become who you are, and then they determine your destiny. It starts with a thought. Now, in terms of your consciousness, what thoughts are you entertaining? I want to be able to read this. Sorry, I just need to reduce the screen. Let me see if it will allow me. Just sorry, one moment. Joys of operating in this world that we are living in now. All right. So in terms of just thinking, for thousands of years, doctors and scientists said that breaking the 4-minute mile was impossible. I've just had a thought. I don't know if one of my friends, GU, is attending the session. So this reminds me of one of the first most complicated comprehension we ever wrote in Standard 6 by an English teacher. But anyway, so it was impossible that one would die in the attempt. Thus, when I got up from the track after collapsing at the finish line, I figured I was dead, said Roger Bannister in 1954, immediately after doing the impossible and breaking through restrictive misconception. Now, the thing is about misconceptions is that they become truth. It becomes a norm. It becomes a belief. For thousands of years, scientists and doctors, and for thousands of years also, we all at some point as human beings thought the world was flat, and it was the truth. So Bannister's feat came through not only physical training and conditioning the mind as well, but also as a result of him constantly visualizing the event in his mind over and over. So that is how sometimes athletes are trained, to close their minds and have the visual end state. Hence, I asked you, what is your dream? Because you want to visualize the end goal of where you want to get to, because ego wants to keep you right here, small, all right? So, and with the comfort zone, unless there is an inspiring end state, it's very difficult to get out of a comfort zone because of, as I've mentioned, the ego. So he did this by visualizing over and over his mind, doing so with such passion that as far as he was concerned, he believed it was a fait accompli. So basically, he was definitely going to win. The most significant aspect of his breakthrough was its influence on others. Prior to Bannister, no one in history had ever run a sub 4-minute mile. The belief that everyone held that it was an impossible feat was so strong that even experts were reinforcing it. Now, what thoughts and beliefs are being reinforced in your mind, in your life, that you cannot do it? It can't be done. It's impossible. It is, so many nots. And it's a fact, by the way. It becomes a fact. And that was one of my things when I went for the test. I was like, I'm choosing that I'm fine. I'm choosing that I'm going to be well. And I don't know if it had anything to do with the symptoms that I had afterwards, because I didn't have any of the symptoms that most people had, except for the cognitive function that was a little bit damaged for a short while. But anyway, so in the belief that it is no surprise, therefore, that indeed was the reality. A year after Bannister broke the barrier, 37 other runners did the same thing 1 year later, after thousands of years of believing it's impossible. The year after that, another 300 runners joined the club. And I mean, after that, it's just been one record after another record of what athletes are able to do. So these gremlins, there we go. So Bannister's belief that the impossible was indeed possible allowed him to both realize his own vision and to influence and inspire hundreds, if not thousands, of other athletes to better their own records. Now, your breakthrough, your emancipation, your transformation can have an enormous impact on others around you, on other women, whether they are young, old, or however, and even not even males, because you've let go of limiting beliefs. You've let go of what appeared to be truth but are not truth. They are assumptions. They are norms, because it's been normalized that it can't be done. So everyone accepts that it can't be done, and you can't swim upstream. So, sorry, I have to look at the time. It always goes so quickly, my goodness. All right, so how do we do this then? Emancipation from within. Firstly, be conscious. Be conscious of the thoughts that you are entertaining. Be conscious of the belief system that you are holding. Be conscious of the pole that as a young elephant you were tied to and conditioned to start believing about your strength, that you're not strong enough to pull out of this pole. Therefore, you are now stuck within this particular context and parameter and boundaries. Love and vote for yourself. If you do not vote for yourself, who should vote for you? And when I say vote for yourself, I mean believe in yourself above everybody else, and everybody else will follow. If you embrace who you are, love yourself. I mean, you hear people needing to be loved, wanting to be loved. Why must anybody love you when you don't love yourself? Love yourself in such a way that people want to love you back in that same amount of love. So if you've got a whole lot of big bucket of love that you want to give away, why not give it to self and let the others have little small cans, small, maybe like that much of that until it can be replicated. But anyway, love and vote for yourself. Voting for yourself meaning believing enough in you and your capabilities so that others can believe in you. Live in questions. What that means, question your belief system. Question the thoughts that you have. Question the lies that you are hearing in your mind. When you hear them, question them. Where does that come from? Is that really true? How true is it? Test it. And then you'll know that whether it's true or not true. What can you do to change it? Don't be afraid of questions. Ask questions. Question it. Question the thought. Question the behavior. Question the attitude. And be a pathfinder. Swim upstream. Create your own reality. Create your own worldview. Because being bound to this particular worldview is what is, again, pole elephant story. So don't be afraid to start out a new thing. Don't be afraid to be the first. Don't be afraid to, remove fear, because that's a negative state. It's from ego. And embrace transformation. Embrace it, because changing and change are so constant. It's just the norm. None of you fit into the shoes you were wearing when you were in grade 3. Even if they're your favorite shoes, you had to outgrow them at some point. And understand that the map is not the territory. So where you are finding yourself now, it's not necessarily the end state. It's a journey. The recipe is not the cake. It's just a guide to get to where you are going. And it's part of a process. Now, obviously, when you are on a journey, you will fall, you will bruise, you will get bumped, all sorts of things will happen. And that's why then you need to be able to embrace transformation. And that's why you need to be able to constantly encourage yourself and believe in yourself, believe that you are able, believe that it is possible. Have faith. Stepping towards your dream is almost one of the best ways of showing your faith. So have faith that it is possible. Be patient with yourself. There's a time and season for everything. So just because you can't fast track a pregnancy. So let's say you're a guy, you can now, okay, if I impregnate 9 girls, then I'll have a baby in less than a month. No, it's a process. So certain things take time. Certain things are a process, and therefore you need to be cognizant of that. So that's my way of being in terms of how do you start then transitioning out of being an elephant in the pool, because it's not your situation that's causing your stress. It's your thoughts. And you can change that right here, right now. You can let go. Peace is a choice, and it has nothing to do with what other people think or what they do. but everything with what you believe and what you choose in spite of those thoughts and negative experiences that you might be going through. So, full circle, what decision or decisions might you need to take? Or what dragons, the things that are scary, might you need to slay in order for you to achieve your dream? What, if anything, in your way of being, how you show up, is holding you back? What support do you need? We all need support systems. It could be in reading, it could be in a network, it could be in exposure, it could be hand holding. There are so many ways of getting support. What support would you need? This almost makes me think of taking an organization of people through a change curve. That, even with forming a new habit, we all fall at some point and go back to what we used to not like to do. So let's say you had a goal weight and you progressively going towards achieving that goal weight. At some point or another, you will trip and you'll fall. And that's why then, in terms of having a support, whether it's a support network of people or a support of when you've tripped and you've fallen, how do you help yourself get up again? How do you pursue the goal again? What action will you take? Because plans without action is pipe dreaming. And then lastly, fail forward quickly. There's never perfect moments. Failing forward quickly means that you embrace the mistakes when you make them. You see them. You do correct actioning or action correct, whatever the words, they go back to front, whichever way. But it means seeing failures as opportunities to learn, because again, it's about the frames that we give, the meaning we give to things. So if failure in your sight is a negative experience, you'll always be afraid to try out new things. But when you fail forward, it means you identify your mistakes, you learn from them very quickly, and you pass the exam. Sometimes I make a joke with life and say that sometimes the failures are life's exam. And when you don't do your verbeterings or your corrections, you'll have to go and rewrite the exam. So it's better like, oh, okay, trip, fall, okay, fix it right now before you fall right back into that hole. I think then, gremlin, that brings us to the end of our session. Sure, I just made over 5 minutes over, but anyway, I hope Sarah will not kill me for that. So I don't know if you'll take questions, but maybe let me do this part that I always not do so very well in. So this session was part of a program that relates to self-mastery, emotional intelligence, which is part of a leadership program that UKZN has. So if you're interested in more or similar programs, or getting into or having something like this presented in your organization, you may contact Sindiswa or Venusha in the details provided within, or you can take the website address, which is probably how you would have logged on to the session in the first place. But anyway, take their phone numbers, the standard number being 031-260-3796. And the next session that is going to be on, because as Sarah mentioned, that we're having a couple of these that relate to women as well as COVID-19. So the next session we are having is still the journey to starting a career entrepreneurship. What was your dream? In case you had that as one of your dreams, what is one of the actions that you're going to take? Attend this free webinar on career in entrepreneurship, women leadership in the context of a rapidly changing times. I think that would be a nice follow-up to what we've just discussed in terms of personal mastery, and if you're going to be leading others and knowing that we are in a world that is constantly changing. Then in terms of the September, then it's a continuation of our other sessions that we've had previously. Fantastic. I've got how many minutes? Sure. All right, we're almost done. That's it. So that's my story for the day, and I can take comments, questions. Sarah, over to you.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Cynthia. Very good presentation today. There have been comments coming throughout. That's what you kept seeing popping up A lot of people were commenting saying hi or pleased to be part of the webinar. That was from Loveo. Norma Gugu says this is brilliant. She also says later on, while misconception is a real conditioning. Dharma says, thanks, Cynthia, for this interesting presentation. So any other questions and comments, please send them through now. Or if you'd like to ask a question live, you can raise your hand. I did have a question from Vani. It was in reference to the example of ego response to agreeing to marriage. Could also be my sixth sense saying that it was all wrong. How do we differentiate between ego and sixth sense in this kind of instance?
That's a great question. So the first part that I mentioned was about being conscious. So being aware of and being in question. All right. So it's not just about taking everything at face value. So when you sense something, is it fear or is it a trigger that is protecting you from making a mistake, what you would refer to as sixth sense? Being fully present in who you are and in your life. Remember, ego operates on autopilot and on conditioning and assumptions, whereas being, you are fully present in who you are, who you were created to be, and how you have chosen to live as a person. So when you start getting those red signals, pause and reflect, and that's why you live in question. Is this a fear or is it a warning of something? And explore into that. So it is a job to be constantly awake and to being rather than be on autopilot. Hence, majority choose autopilot. I hope I've answered you.
Okay, we have another comment from Faiza. She says, thank you, very inspirational and informative. Then Galaxy S9 says, thank you so much, I learned a lot. But Galaxy S9, you've also raised your hand. So I am going to open up your mic if you want to ask your question. Just check if your mic is muted. Unless it was an error, I don't know. Oh, there we go. Galaxy S9, your mic is open if you want to ask your question. Okay, no, I don't know. I think the hand has now gone down. Vani also says, thank you, excellent webinar. I am going to take this moment quickly to do a quick poll where you can rate your webinar for today. But if you do have any other questions, now is the time to raise your hand. I do have another raised hand. Let me, oh, it went down again. Debbie Pillay says, thank you, excellent. Galaxy J4 says, awesome presentation, leaves much to think about, will definitely be moving out of my comfort zone, and if I fail, I'll be falling forward. That's a good, some good feedback. I do have a comment. Q Hamu M, I think it must be some sort of abbreviation. Apologies, I came late. When will this recording be available to us? Thank you so much. So we will have this recording available by the end of today. If you did RSVP and receive your RSVP email, we will be sending out the recording similarly via a mailer. So that will go out this afternoon. And you're also welcome to just keep checking the website. Under past webinars, we've got all our recordings there as well. Okay, so that looks like about it for the comments. One more comment from Connie. Excellent presentation, Cynthia. Keep up the good work.
Thank you very much, everyone. And hopefully one day we will have a session where I can be able to see people. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day and soar like the eagles that you are. Cheers.
Thank you very much. No, thanks so much, Cynthia, for sharing with us today. I think you've been very inspirational to all of us. If you want to hear anything more of what Cynthia has done, she did do a 4-part series on There Be Dragons, Transitioning Through the Unknown, and that is on our website if you want to hear about what she has to say about change management. So thank you, Cynthia. Your presentations are always awesome. Thank you as well to all our attendees for joining with us today. The video and the slides will be available on our website, so we'll be sending out this to you this afternoon. And do take note of the upcoming webinars, and please do RSVP. Next week, we have Vani Murli joining us, talking about the journey to starting a career in entrepreneurship. And then the following week, we'll be finalizing our Women's Month series, and we'll have Dr. Pinky and Tembu talking about women leadership in the context of rapidly changing times. So please do log on to our website to see what we have on offer and to RSVP for these webinars. It's www.ukznextendedlearning.com. Otherwise, we hope you enjoyed this session. So stay safe, everyone, and we'll see you next time.